Hello, this is Mr. Lala Bubba, and welcome back to another installment of Pokemon Competitive Bios. In these videos, I take a look at one Pokemon, grade its overall usefulness, and give suggestions as to how you can use it competitively. This week, I'm going to be looking at Absol. Absol, if you take a first look at it, is a Dark-type Pokemon that belongs to the RU, which stands for Rarely Used tier. It was introduced in Generation 3. Now, the first thing I'm going to look at is Absol's stats. I will then move on to its move pool, its abilities, its typing, the counters against it in RU, and then I'm going to give it an overall grade, taking all of those factors into account at the end of the video. Now, first thing I'm going to look at is Absol's stats, of course. Absol has a base HP stat of 65. Its attack stat is pretty good at 130. Its defense stat is at 60, its special attack is 75, its special defense is 60, and its speed is the same as its special attack at 75. The grade that I chose to give Absol on its stats was a B+. This is because it has a great attack stat. It's a really good attack stat. But the problem is, when you typically see a high attack stat, you see a high physical defense or a high speed stat to help back it up. The problem with Absol is you don't see either of those. You see a generally low speed stat, not a terrible speed stat, but it's not a great speed stat. It's only a base 75, and it's also very frail defensively, with its defense and special defense both being base 60. And that is why I chose to give Absol a B+ in the stat department. Onto its move pool. Absol I chose to give a B- when it comes to its move pool. Night Slash is a very good move to use on an Absol because of one of its abilities, which I'll get to later, and also because of its same type attack bonus that it gets on that move. The problem with Absol's moveset, a main gaping hole, is that it relies on Sucker Punch typically, because of the fact that it doesn't have many other powerful moves. It has generally low base power on its moves. One big upside to Absol's moveset, however, is its accessibility to both X-Scissor and Rock Slide, which can cover gaping weaknesses. The problem with these moves is that they are not very powerful, but again they can be boosted by one of its abilities, which we'll get to later. Overall, its moves generally have low base powers, and that's why it doesn't get a great grade when it comes to its move pool, but it doesn't get a horrible grade. Now, in regards to Absol's abilities, I chose to give Absol a B+. Now, Absol can choose from one of three abilities. Its first ability that I'm going to cover is probably its best, and that is Super Luck. What Super Luck does is it raises a Pokemon's chance to land a critical hit, which can be very, very important in competitive play. It can swing the entire tide of a match. Its second ability, Justified, raises Absol's stats when it is hit by a Dark-type move. Now, this is a good ability in theory, but not many Pokemon would typically hit Absol with a Dark-type move. If you're able to switch in Absol to something that would be using this type of move, it would be good, but it's hard to really see that pan out. Its last ability is Pressure, and what that does is it raises the PP usage of the foe. So instead of using 1 every time that a foe uses a move, it wastes 2 power points from the move that it uses. This would be typically better on a Pokemon that would wall, but Absol doesn't do that. PP stalling is typically not used very much whatsoever, and especially on a frail Pokemon like Absol, it doesn't have much use at all. Its abilities, in that department, it's really boosted by Super Luck, but it's still not anything to brag about, so that's why I'm going to give Absol's abilities a B+. Now when it comes to typing, Absol gets a C+. It's just sort of average. It's a mono dark type. It does have the 1 immunity to Psychic, which puts it slightly above average, but it's still not great. It's weak to both Fighting and Bug, and the problem with that is that Fighting types, there are a lot of them. They're very abundant in RU, so it's hard to give this thing a grade above a C+. But that is, I think that's a pretty fitting grade for Absol's abilities. Now, onto probably the big downfall of Absol, and that is its counters. In RU, there are a lot of fighting types. There are a lot of other Pokemon that can counter Absol. Good examples being Tangrowth and Quagsire. Both of those Pokemon are able to easily wall Absol's physical hits and deal things right back to really hurt Absol because of its frailty. Smeargle and Sigilyph can also hurt Absol with status moves, and it can outspeed it. Absol is generally crippled by Substitute because it has to rely on Sucker Punch so much. And now that we've looked at all of Absol's aspects, including its stats, its move pool, its abilities, its typings, and its counters, I'm going to give Absol an overall grade. Now, this took me a bit of time to actually decide, but I decided to go with just sort of an average C. Absol gets a C when it comes to usefulness, in my opinion. It has a great attack, but the rest of its stats are very mediocre, and it has a somewhat limited move pool, despite the fact that it does have some good moves that it can use, as well as some decent abilities, mainly Super Luck, but I guess Justified is usable. It's not very good, but it's usable. It has a very average typing, and it has a lot of counters. That was the main thing that kind of dragged Absol down, was its abundance of counters, especially because of the fact that there are so many good fighting types in RU that are well, not necessarily there are so many, it's just that those are typically used as attacking Pokemon, and they could really mess up Absol. But even though this thing gets an average grade, I would not underestimate Absol in the slightest. If you're facing one, or if you're deciding to use one, don't hesitate if you've decided to use an Absol in RU, because it can be a huge threat if it's used right, and if you do play it out to its full strategy. This can be a very useful Pokemon. It's just that it can also be a very mediocre Pokemon, that it doesn't get a really stellar grade. But a C, I think, is a fitting grade for Absol, and that is the grade that I'm going to give it for its usefulness. That is the grade that Absol gets. And now on to the final portion of my Pokemon competitive bio, and this is the part of the episode where I suggest a set that you could say, I guess, is a bit unorthodox that you could run on the Pokemon that I feature in the video. Of course, this week's is Absol. Now, Absol is typically used as a physical sweeper. You can maybe see something like choice items on it. Sometimes you can see a Life Orb, but it's a bit less common. So here's the set that I'm going to suggest to run on Absol to be a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm going to start with explaining the EVs that I chose for this set. I went with a speed of plus 252, so you put 252 EVs into its speed, putting 200 EVs into special attack, and 52 EVs into its generally high attack stat, and the leftover 4 going into HP. I would run a hasty nature on this Absol that is going to raise its speed and lower its defense stat. This is going to help it to do a bit more sweeping because of its very mediocre speed stat. And of course, also the EV investment is going to help with that. The item that I chose to give it was the Life Orb. That's going to raise the damage of Absol's moves done. However, it's going to take small amounts of HP away every time that you use a move, or you do damage, I should say. This is why I chose to put the extra 4 EVs into HP rather than its special attack or its attack, is to give it a little bit more time to use the Life Orb. Ability, of course, I would suggest Super Luck. Justified is the only other usable ability it really has, and it's not really something that is going to help it whatsoever in its sweeping. Now on to the moveset. The moves I chose to give Absol were Night Slash, Fire Blast, Ice Beam, and Zen Headbutt. Night Slash is going to take advantage both of same type attack bonus, as well as Super Luck, because it already has a high critical hit ratio, so having that boosted twice is going to have a very high rate of getting critical hits with Night Slash. Of course, you can also switch this out with Sucker Punch. They're really two interchangeable things. The next move, Fire Blast, is very powerful, and you're going to need that because its special attack, even with the EV investment, is not going to be anything that's really stellar. You could switch Fire Blast out for Flamethrower if you choose accuracy over power, But the one that I would suggest more is Fire Blast, because it does do more damage. Ice Beam is going to be used mostly to cover its weakness to Bug. Now, you could do this with Fire Blast or Flamethrower, but also Ice Beam is just going to generally provide more type coverage against other types that you could see in battle, since you already have a Fire-type move, if you're running Flamethrower or Fire Blast, and it's also a decently powerful special move to take advantage of that special attack EV investment. The final move I chose to put on this moveset is Zen Headbutt. I know this seems a little bit out of the ordinary, but that's going to cover its fighting type weakness, which is absolutely crucial because of the, as I mentioned before, the good fighting types that could be a huge threat to Absol could possibly be taken care of by Zen Headbutt. And it has an ability to flinch, a possibility to flinch, I should say, and that is definitely going to help with its sweeping and also with covering its weaknesses. If a counter comes in, it's able to maybe flinch axe it, dare I say. But anyway, that is the set that I chose as my suggestion for you guys to try out. Tell me how it works. I'm not quite sure. And that is going to conclude this episode of Pokemon Competitive Bios. Please remember to leave a rating. Tell me what you thought of the video. And also leave some feedback for things that could be improved. I'm also always open to suggestions for what should be used in the next installment, which Pokemon you would like to see featured in my Pokemon Competitive Bios. Thank you for watching, everyone, and have a good day.